Is it worth the upgrade? If I'm totally honest, there's not a lot of difference. Good morning, welcome back to my channel. Ben is running. Today I'm going to be giving you my first impressions of the Nike Next Percent 2, which has just come out. It's the latest in the marathon racing shoe, full length carbon plate from Nike. I'm going to be talking you through the specifications of this shoe, talking about what's new between the Nike Next Percent 2 and the original, which I have here, the Nike Next Percent 1. The Nike Next Percent 1 was my favourite racing shoe until this came along. A little bit of a spoiler there, this shoe definitely tops the original. So I'm going to be talking about the specs, what's new, my first impressions having run my first run in these shoes, and finally, are they worth the upgrade? Okay, so moving on to the specifications of this shoe. It's exactly the same full length carbon plate and Zoom X midsole that you're used to in the original Vaporfly. So all the changes come in the upper. It's still got that original 8mm drop. The shoe comes in at around 200 grams, depending on your size. Slightly heavier actually, which is worth noting, than the original. I believe 4 or 5 grams heavier, but very not really noticeable when putting the shoe on. So I'd say they're basically the same weight as the original. And yeah, exactly the same specifications really in terms of performance as the originals. So moving on to what's new. So this is the latest version, the Next Percent 2. The original was released in 2019, it's now 2021. So 2 years later they brought this version out, and there are 4 main differences to the shoe. So all the differences really are in the upper of this shoe. So the lower half of this shoe is all the same, nothing different at all from the original, which doesn't surprise me, to be honest, because the original was such a good shoe. They haven't changed anything, no adjustments to the midsole and the carbon plate, which is nice. So it's that same familiar feel to the Vaporfly. So yeah, moving on to the 4 main differences. The first is the upper. So the original Nike Next Percent 1 had this vapor weave technology, sort of more like a plastic feel to the upper, whereas the Nike Next Percent 2 has this new engineered mesh, more breathable, sort of almost like a fly net. If you've ran in the Alpha Flies from Nike, it's a very similar sort of material, much more breathable. It seems to conform to your foot a lot better than the original Nike Vaporfly, which seemed to crease up a little bit, had like a plastic bag type feel when you put it on your foot. Didn't quite like hug your foot like this shoe does. So the upper is completely different. Another minor difference, but I've definitely found makes a big improvement to the shoe, was this tongue area. They've added some padding in the tongue, just so that when you tie your laces, you don't get any, the pressure basically is reduced by that, a little bit of padding in the tongue, which is a nice improvement. The third change is to the laces. Again, very minor change, but these laces are now the ribbed laces that Nike originally used in the Alpha Fly for the first time, I believe. So you get a much better lockdown. The laces don't seem to come undone because they sort of, the friction sort of grips better to each other basically. So that's a nice little change. And finally, the 4th change to the shoe this time round is this reinforced, I'm not sure what type of material it is, sort of a plastic material around this sort of the toe box, which just keeps your foot nice and contained in the shoe. It's also meant to improve the durability. Obviously I've only done 1 run in this shoe, so I can't say whether it's made it more durable or not yet, but it seems to. These are sort of the high pressure areas where you would expect to see some wear over time, so it's nice that they've put some reinforcement around there. So yeah, they're the 4 main differences to the Next% 2 over the Next% 1. So moving on to my first impressions, I have only used this shoe for one run, which was a 10-kilometer race at the weekend. If you haven't watched the video, I'll leave a banner up in the top right. Click on that, have a little look, see how I got on. So yeah, I've only run in these shoes just the once, but having run 340 kilometers in these, the originals, which is around 210 miles, they have a very similar feel in terms of the performance. My first impression of putting this shoe on the foot is it definitely fits a lot nicer than the original. The new engineered mesh upper definitely fits on the foot a lot nicer. It doesn't wrinkle up like the original was, and you can get a really nice lockdown. With the original, the first time I used it, I tied the laces a bit too tight and ended up causing some bruising basically to the top of my foot, where the tendons, the veins are on top of your foot. So the padding that they've added to this shoe was definitely noticeable when I was tying up the shoe, and is probably the biggest improvement for me with this Next% 2 compared to the original, because I did have a little bit of a problem with the lockdown in the original. So lockdown is much improved, performance is very much the same. Anything else I noticed? Obviously with this new mesh, it's much more breathable. Not that I found the original too hot, but you notice that your feet are getting nice and aerated. I guess over a longer distance, that would be a benefit, because your foot's not going to get too hot. If you're running in a warmer climate, then that's also going to be good for you. But for me, it didn't really make much difference, because obviously I was only running the 10k sort of distance, and it was quite a cold day anyway. So the breathability factor, I could tell there was a difference, but it didn't really make much difference, if that makes sense. And yeah, my first impressions was it was a very familiar feel. Having run 340 kilometers in the original, this did feel a little bit firmer, but I think that's just purely because the foam in here is fresh, so it's still nice and hard and responsive. The plate is still very rigid. So yeah, first impressions were pretty damn good. Still that familiar Vaporfly Next% feeling that the original had, which everybody loved. I've not heard a bad thing about it. It's my favourite shoe, but Nike seemed to have listened and made some slight improvements to the shoe. So finally, should you upgrade to the Next% 2 from the original? So this shoe comes in at £209 instead of the original £240. So it's a nice little bit cheaper. I'm glad Nike did that, because it definitely encouraged me to purchase the shoe. So maybe it's a clever marketing strategy there. So it's a little bit cheaper. In terms of the actual performance of the shoe, I'm going to be totally honest, I could not tell any difference between this and the original. So if you've got a pair of the original Next% at home, they're still in good condition, they're not worn out, I probably wouldn't bother buying this, the upgrade if you like, because like I said, the midsole and the carbon fibre plate is very much the same, so it's the same feel. That being said, the Vaporfly was my favourite shoe, still is my favourite shoe to race in, so I did go for the upgrade. So yeah, I personally have now retired this shoe to my workouts, my faster tempo run shoes. I'm going to wear this down until it basically can't be used anymore. So I've run 340 kilometers, hopefully it'll get to around 1,000 kilometers before I have to retire it, and I'm just going to save this for race days. So is it worth the upgrade? If I'm totally honest, there's not a lot of difference. So if you've already got this shoe, I wouldn't bother with this shoe basically, but if you haven't got this one, I'd still highly recommend the Vaporfly, because for me it's still the most responsive, the fastest marathon racing shoe that there is out there. So yeah, that pretty much sums up the video. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and consider watching the 10k race vlog if you haven't done already. I'm currently training for a 70-minute half marathon, I'm going to be attempting it in just under 2 weeks now, probably in this shoe, maybe in the Vaporfly. I haven't quite decided yet which shoe I'm going to use, so subscribe to stick around to see how I get on in the half marathon race in just under 2 weeks time. And yeah, thanks for watching, see you again soon.